I'm a 25-year-old woman, and up until last week I was all set to get married, but things took a huge turn, and I ended up running away the night before the big day. My boyfriend, who's also 25, and I had been together for 3 years, and we were engaged. For 6 months of that time together, we have 2 kids, twin boys who are just a year old. Having them wasn't something we planned, and initially my boyfriend really didn't want to go through with the pregnancy, but I've always known I wanted to be a mom. I felt that maternal pull strongly, and when we found out about the twins, it just felt like the right time for me, even if it wasn't perfect timing. So I stood my ground. I told him that I was having our babies whether he was on board or not. I even said he could walk away if he wanted to, and I wouldn't chase him for child support. I was determined to raise my children on my own if I had to. However, he did need some time to wrap his head around everything. When I told him I was ready to end our relationship if he kept pushing me to not have our baby, that's when he started to come around. During my pregnancy, he was really supportive, and after our boys were born, he stepped up as a dad. I'll admit, having twins was a lot more than I bargained for. And looking back, I'm not sure I could have managed without him. So in a way, I was grateful he stayed. Fast forward 6 months, he proposed and I said yes. It felt like we'd moved past his initial reluctance about becoming a dad. He was so involved in caring that it seemed like his earlier resistance had never happened. I guess becoming a mom softened me a bit too. And I was ready to let bygones be bygones and start this new chapter with him. After all, we've been through a lot together already. 3 years of a relationship and a pretty intense pregnancy. We spent months planning our wedding, and I was genuinely happy. My parents were over the moon too because they really liked my ex. He'd always been the perfect guy in their eyes. Everything was going smoothly, and it felt like all the pieces were falling into place. But then, just one night before we were supposed to get married, everything fell apart. I still can't wrap my head around how a single phone call could end a relationship that had lasted for 3 years, but it did. That call made me realize that marrying him would have been a huge mistake. The day before our wedding, following tradition, my ex and I were staying in separate places, so there I was in our place just hanging out after dinner while my boyfriend was at his family's house. Not too far away, we had this sweet phone call where he was all lovey-dovey telling me how much he loved me and how pumped he was about us getting married soon. That call really got me feeling all the feels, and we had this nice emotional exchange before saying bye to each other, but then he didn't end the call properly. Sometimes you think you've hung up, but you haven't really pressed the button hard enough. Yeah, that what happened. So, because he didn't hang up right, I could still hear what was going on his end. His dad started talking to him, asking him if he was chatting with me. I got a bit nosy and decided to listen in just to see what they were talking about. And boy, what I heard next was something straight out of a drama movie. It's been a whole week and I still can't stop thinking about it. His dad asked him if he was still feeling the same way he did a couple of days back, and my ex was like, yeah. Then his mom joined the convo, and she was all about pushing him to just suck it up and get married. No matter what he was feeling, my ex got a bit heated and tried to stand up for himself, saying he should be able to make his own choices and that they shouldn't be able to push him around like that. But then his dad dropped a bombshell. He was like, look, we can't force you to marry someone you don't love. But what we can do is cut you out of the will if you don't. So basically, my ex was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Get married or get nothing. His mom then went on this whole spiel about him needing to grow up and take responsibility, especially now that he was a dad. She was pretty harsh, saying it was bad enough he had kids out of wedlock, but he could sort of fix that by marrying me instead of dragging his feet because he wasn't ready. My ex tried to argue back, saying it was totally unfair for them to corner him into marrying me just so he wouldn't be left out of the will. He was really upset, talking about how nobody ever cares if he's ready for big life events or not. He felt constantly pushed into situations he wasn't prepared for, like becoming a dad and now getting married. He said it was scary enough having kids when he wasn't sure he was ready. And now his parents were forcing him into a marriage he wasn't sure about either. So yeah, that's the extended version. Hearing all this secretly without him knowing I was still on the line was a lot to process. It was clear he was feeling trapped and stressed about the whole marriage thing, and his parents weren't making it any easier by putting all that pressure on him. After discovering all this, my head was spinning. My boyfriend, the guy I was about to marry, didn't actually want to get married. He felt forced into it because he was scared of losing his inheritance. He thought we were all being super unfair to him for pushing him into this corner. And then, just like in a dramatic scene from a movie, he got so upset that he just stormed out of the room, leaving his phone behind by mistake. His parents kept talking right after he left, going on about how they thought he was being irresponsible. That's when I realized I couldn't listen anymore and hung up. I was completely shocked, frozen in place, not sure what I was supposed to do next. Finding out that the only reason my boyfriend agreed to marry me and stick around was because of his parents' threat to cut him out of the will was a massive blow. And to learn this bombshell the night before our wedding, it was too much. I couldn't wrap my head around it. For a few minutes, I just sat there trying to process everything. Up until this moment, his actions had given me no hint that he was feeling trapped. Sure, we had hit a rough patch when I first found out I was pregnant, but after we got through that, he seemed to be fully on board, being a great partner and dad to our twins. I was clueless about his real feelings. He had been putting on quite the performance, pretending to be happy and supportive. I have to admit he was really good at it. Once the initial shock wore off, I knew I had to leave. I couldn't go through with the wedding, not with this heavy secret hanging over us. I had my kids with me, so I gathered up a few things, got them into the car, and drove off to find a hotel somewhere out of town. By the time we arrived, it was late, and the kids were understandably upset from the disruption. I did my best to calm them down and get them back to sleep. Then, with the heavy heart, I blocked my boyfriend and his whole family on my phone. I spent that entire night crying, mourning the relationship and the future I thought we had. The realization that the past year had been nothing but a lie was crushing. Finally, exhaustion took over, and I fell asleep around 4 a.m, completely drained. The financial aspect of the wedding, the venue, the decorations, everything that had been paid for was all covered by my ex and his wealthy parents. Considering the circumstances, I wasn't concerned about the money lost. They were the ones who wanted this wedding in the first place so they could deal with the fallout. After all, they were the ones who had orchestrated this mess, so it was only fitting they bear the consequences of how everything unraveled. So, I was out of there faster than you can say wedding disaster. I didn't even wait to get some sleep. I grabbed my phone and sent a message to all my friends and family, telling them the wedding was off and I'd fill them in on the details later. I did spill any beans right then and there. I made it super clear to my crew that I didn't want them anywhere near my ex or his family. I was like, don't talk to them. Don't answer their calls, nothing. And because my friends and family are awesome, I knew they'd listen to me. No questions asked. The day that was supposed to be my wedding day, I spent it in a hotel room, just me and my twin boys. We ate a bunch of snacks and played around, trying to make the best of a pretty lousy situation. Inside, I was a mess, heartbroken and feeling all sorts of upset. But I had to keep it together for my kids. They needed me to be strong. So I put on my bravest face for them. After taking a day to just be with my boys and process everything, I decided it was time to face the music. I dropped my kids off at my parents' house for a bit and headed back to our place to pick up my things and say goodbye to that chapter of my life for good. When I saw my ex again, he was exactly how I imagined he'd be. Looking all worn out, anxious, and throwing a mix of concern and panic my way. To this day, I'm not sure if he was really worried or if it was just another performance. He immediately started bombarding me with questions about where I'd been saying he was super worried. Before I could even get a word in, he was off on a rant about how they all waited for me at the wedding venue and how what I did was totally out of line. He said I owed them an explanation and even a public apology because apparently getting cold feet isn't a good enough reason to leave him and his family hanging. I barely reacted to his whole spiel. I just hit him with the truth that I heard the conversation he had with his parents. The one where it all came out how he really felt about marrying me. He looked totally lost for a second, but when he realized what I was talking about, he couldn't hide the guilt. I didn't stick around to argue or listen to any excuses. I walked past him, went inside to grab my stuff, and left without looking back. There was nothing left to say. He made his choices, and now I was making mine. The whole idea of being his wife, that ship had sailed and I wasn't about to board it again. After everything that happened, my biggest priority was just to focus on being the best mom I could be. It's almost been a whole week since the day I thought I'd get married, and since then, there's been total silence between us. I figured that was the universe's way of telling me it's over between me and him. I had nothing left to say, and I thought he felt the same. But life had another twist waiting for me. Just a couple of hours ago, out of the blue, he showed up at my parents' house, practically begging for a chance to talk to me. By this time, I had already spilled the beans to my parents and all my close friends about the mess. They all knew the gritty details, so it's no surprise they were not exactly thrilled to see him standing at the doorstep. Despite their hesitation, something in me said I should hear him out, just this once. But there was no way I was letting him inside. The twins had just drifted off to sleep, and the last thing I needed was a shouting match with him that would end up waking them, so we ended up standing in the front yard under the stars having what felt like the most surreal conversation he started off with in apology. Trying to explain himself, he said he truly loved me and the kids despite not feeling ready to tie the knot. He admitted everything he did and said that night was a mistake, but he still wanted to be part of our lives. Listening to him, I was torn. How could I just wipe the slate clean after he deceived me for so long? Trusting him again wasn't going to be easy, and I was drowning in doubts. Yet, part of me wondered if there was a way forward. I told him I'd need time to think about everything. He seemed to understand, saying he didn't want to break up and hoped we could find a way to start fresh without his parents' influence this time. I'm at a crossroads, unsure of what to do next. The idea of my children growing up with their dad around is important to me. But how can I move past the lies? My trust in him has been broken into pieces. And honestly, after the roller coaster of this past week, I'm just mentally and emotionally drained. I need a moment to figure things out without any pressure. So I'm left pondering the big question. What if I decide that trying again with him isn't the right choice for me or the kids? What then? Update 1. Hey everyone. It's been a minute since my last update, huh? Life's been pretty hectic lately with work, taking care of my kids, and the whole process of moving out, so I haven't really found the time to fill you all in. First off, I've gotta say, the amount of support and love I've received from all of you has been absolutely incredible. I'm seriously blown away by how kind and supportive so many of you have been. And I'm deeply grateful for every piece of advice you've shared. It's all been super helpful as I navigate through this whole situation. So, yeah, I've been talking to a lawyer about sorting out the custody for my kids. I've made the tough decision that I don't want to try fixing things with my ex. It's funny though how some folks decide to send me mean messages, calling me selfish for even thinking about getting back with him. That felt really harsh and quite unfair, to be honest. Look, I'm a mom, sure, but I'm also just a person. It's only been a week since that life-changing phone call, and we were together for 3 whole years. Of course, I hadn't just gotten over him overnight. Back then, I was caught up in all my feelings. I truly loved him, which made me think about giving it another shot. Now, though, I'm feeling a lot clearer-headed, and I realized that I've got to focus on what's best for me and my little ones. Getting back with him just isn't the right move. I mean, all that hate and judgment really wasn't necessary. But then again, it's the internet. I guess I should have expected as much. I started looking for a lawyer just a couple of days after the wedding was called off. It took a bit of time to find a right one. Someone I felt comfortable with and could really trust. The whole topic of custody never came up between my ex and me before all this went down. We never imagined we'd end up here having to figure all this out. Okay, so here's the deal. Now that my ex and I have officially called it quits, I've started to think a lot about what needs to happen next, especially when it comes to my kids. The thought of someone trying to take them away from me is something I can't even bear to think about. While I'm pretty sure my ex wouldn't actually try to do something like that, I'm not so confident about parents. They have some pretty old-fashioned views and are super strict about how things should be done in a family. I'm almost 100% sure they're not going to be okay with the idea of their son not having custody of his children. They're the type who would do just about anything to make sure things go their way. So, I'm bracing myself for whatever might come next. The last conversation I had with my ex was about 3 days ago, and since then, it's been complete silence on his end. This silence is pretty telling, to be honest. It just confirms that despite whatever he said about wanting to fix our relationship, he's not really interested in making an effort to be with me or to change his ways. If he truly meant what he said, wouldn't he have made some kind of effort to check in on me or the kids? But no, I haven't heard a peep from him. This is how I know for sure that not getting back together with him is the right decision. Trust between us has completely disappeared, and there's no way I can be with someone who doesn't genuinely want to be with me. It's clear that moving on is the best thing for me. I'm gearing up to let him know my decision soon, particularly about the custody stuff. I'm really hoping he doesn't freak out or get angry about it, because dealing with a big fight over custody is the last thing I need right now. So, I'm preparing myself for that conversation, hoping it goes as smoothly as possible, but also preparing for it to possibly get a bit messy. The main thing is I need to do what's best for my kids, and ensuring they stay with me is at the top of my list. I just want to move forward without any more unnecessary drama or complications. Update 2. Alright, so here's the thing. I finally got up the nerve to have a really important chat with my ex. I told them straight that getting back together just wasn't in the cards for us. I mentioned that I was planning to go ahead and file for full custody of our kids. I kind of expected him to be okay with it, or at least not too upset, because he's been pretty open about not feeling ready for all the responsibilities that come with marriage and being a dad. I thought maybe he'd be somewhat relieved that I wasn't trying to force him into a situation he clearly wasn't ready for. But boy, did things not go as I expected. Instead of being understanding or even a bit grateful, he got super upset. We ended up in this big argument right there. He insisted that breaking with him was one thing, but taking the kids away was something he couldn't stand for now. If we were just any normal couple, maybe his reaction would make a bit more sense, but given everything you all know about our situation, it just didn't. Add up, let's not forget this is the guy who up until just a week ago didn't even want to be a dad. He made it clear he wasn't ready for this kind of responsibility, yet here he was suddenly all about fighting for custody of our kids. It screamed that something weird was going on, probably his parents trying to call the shots from behind the scenes the whole time he was freaking out, and I was there trying to get him to lower his voice because guess what? We were in the middle of a restaurant, and it was getting seriously embarrassing with all the stares we were getting. After a bit, he started to calm down, and I figured it was my chance to try and talk some sense into him. The last thing I wanted was a long, messy custody battle. Financially, I just wasn't in a place to go up against his parents in their deep pockets. They could afford top-notch lawyers that could drag this thing out forever. And even putting money aside, I was just too drained to even think about going through with that kind of fight. I knew his parents a means to make this difficult for me, even if I felt I was in the right. So I did my best to reason with him. I reminded him that just a week ago he was saying he wasn't ready for kids. I was trying to make him see that moving forward with me having full custody was the best thing for everyone, especially given how he felt not too long ago. It was a tough conversation, trying to get him to see my point of view without things escalating again. I just hoped he'd see reason and not make this harder than it needed to be. I mean, I wanted our kids to have their dad in their lives, but not like this. Not with so much and uncertainty. So yeah, that's where I was at. Trying to navigate this super tricky situation and figure out the best way forward for me and the kids. So there I was, ready to take on the full responsibility of looking after our kids, all by myself. Honestly, that's exactly what I wanted from the beginning. And him, well, he got the chance to live his life without any strings attached. No worries about being tied down by marriage or the daily duties of looking after kids. I kind of thought that's what he wanted to. So in my mind, everyone was getting what they wanted out of the deal. It seemed like the perfect plan. But then, out of nowhere, he hits me with this news that he's changed his mind. Now he says he's totally ready to be a dad. That just didn't sit right with me at all. I mean, think about it. If he spent a whole year feeling unsure about being a dad, there's just no way he could suddenly decide he's ready in just a week. It didn't make any sense. So I had to ask him straight up if he was keeping something from me because his sudden change of heart was setting off alarm bells left and right. And guess what? He finally spilled the beans. The real reason he was suddenly all about fighting for custody was because of a chat he had with his parents. Honestly, I wasn't too surprised by that. After I told him I knew the whole story and called off our wedding, he ran straight to his parents, who then told him he needed to patch things up with me and fast. That's why a week later he was back, trying to convince me everything could be okay between us. His parents had finally accepted that I wasn't going to marry him. That was no longer an option. But they were totally against the idea of him not having a part in his kids' lives. They even went as is to threaten to cut him off financially if he didn't convince me to agree to a joint custody arrangement. There he was, begging me to consider sharing custody of our kids. But hearing all this just made me feel sick. I was so over it. It was clear as day that he was only doing his parents' bidding because in the end, what he really cared about was keeping his hands on his parents' money, not genuinely wanting to be there for me or the kids. He had shown no real interest in being a part of our lives, no real commitment to us, until it looked like he might lose out on his inheritance. And that's when he decided to play the role of the concerned dad. If the only thing motivating him was his parents' wealth, then I didn't want him anywhere near us. Our kids deserve so much more than a dad whose only interest in them is tied to money. I didn't even bother with the idea of child support because I just wanted him completely out of our lives. I wanted nothing to do with him, no connections. No reasons for him to think he had any right to be involved with me or our children anymore. So my ex, he's kind of the type who doesn't really stand up for himself, especially when it comes his parents. It's pretty clear he'd do just about anything to make sure they don't kick him out of their lives or cut him off financially. Honestly, it's kind of sad to see. A few days have passed since all that drama, and I've gone ahead and blocked him on every possible platform because I can't stand the thought of talking to him or even seeing him pop up on my phone. The last thing he tried to tell me was this idea about sharing custody of our kids. And then he threw in this wild idea about splitting his future inheritance with me after his parents are gone. I mean, can you believe that? He's actually suggesting this ridiculous plan just to try and keep things smooth between us. It really makes me think about my judgment for getting involved with someone who's pretty much just a spoiled rich kid. I've always been the kind of person who's worked for everything I've got. My parents did their best for me, but we weren't swimming in money or anything. I had to bust my tail in school to land scholarships for college because that was the only way I could afford it. I've always had to work super hard for everything I have. And then there's my ex. He's the only child of some really wealthy parents, and I think that pretty much says it all. You probably have an idea of the type of person he is. I actually believed is different when we started dating. He did a really good job convincing me he changed, but man, was I wrong. He deserves an award for his acting because he totally had me fooled for the last 3 years. Now, though, I see him for who he really is. And I've got no interest in sticking around to discover anything else about him. I'm completely done with that chapter of my life. I'm totally okay with raising my kids by myself. Having no dad around is way better than having one who doesn't even want the job. Now I'm 100% sure leaving him was the best decision. I just hope he realizes he should give up his parental rights instead of dragging us through a messy custody fight. That's what I'm praying for at least. Update 3. Hey folks, it's been quite some time since I've popped in here with an update. And boy do I have some stories to share. Life has been nothing short of a whirlwind lately, and I've been up to my ears in all sorts of changes and adjustments. But let's dive into the good stuff that I've been eager to tell you all about. So the first big piece of news is about our living situation. Me and my little duo, my adorable twins, have made a move to a new apartment. It's definitely on smaller side compared to the house where my ex and I used to live. But you know what? It feels like a fresh start. A place that's truly ours and not tied to past memories. It's got its own little charm. And I'm all about making it our cozy haven. Another bonus is that our new place is super close to where my parents live. This is a game changer because it means they can swing by more often to spend time with their grandkids, which they absolutely love. And let's be real, having them nearby for a bit of extra help is a blessing I can't ignore. Plus, on top of that, I've managed to hire a full-time nanny. Juggling work and twin toddlers is no small feat, so having an extra set of hands around the house has been a godsend. I consider myself incredibly lucky to be in a position where I can afford this kind of help. My folks have been pitching in financially too, for which I'm endlessly grateful. This whole scenario wasn't something any of us saw coming, but we're navigating it together, and their support means the world to me. Now, onto the juicy bit that I'm sure has piqued your curiosity, the latest on my ex. In a surprising turn of he's officially signed away his parental rights. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what exactly led to this decision. If I had to take a guess, I'd say he's probably had a moment of clarity and chose to stand up to his parents for once. It's a big step, and while the reasons behind it might remain a bit of a mystery, it's a significant development in our ongoing saga. So there's a chance that his parents finally decided to back off and stop pushing him. One of my buddies mentioned that he's not living at his old spot anymore. which kind of hints that he might have decided to stand up for himself and make a big change. A few days back out of blue, he got in touch with me again, throwing another apology my way. But this time, he threw in a curveball. He wanted to give me money. Kind of like saying sorry with cash. I know some of you might think I'm off my rocker for not accepting it. But to me, it's not about the money. I was dead serious when I said I wanted him out of my life for good. Yeah, hearing him say sorry helps close a chapter. But taking money from him, that just doesn't sit right with me. I'm looking to move forward, not keep some weird financial tie to my past, especially not from an ex. I've got a strong support system with my parents. We're more than ready to tackle raising my kids without needing a single penny from him. So, I let him know through a text that I appreciate the offer, but no thanks, and it would be best if we just didn't talk anymore. Surprisingly, he's actually respected that wish up until now. These days, my life is all about my kids. They're my top priority, and I'm dedicating all my energy to making sure they have the best life possible. Holding on to any negative feelings about my ex or wasting energy being upset just isn't in the cards for me. My main mission is to be an amazing mom to my children. That's where all my focus is, and honestly, it's the only thing that really matters to me right now. Thanks for watching.